What if you were offered a job, a high-paying salary, thousands of dollars a week, the hours, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Your only duty to sit in an empty office and copy the Encyclopedia Britannica by hand. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But what if the only requirement, the only qualification for this perfect job, was the color of your hair? This is not a dream. This is a trap, and it is the story of one of the most bizarre, brilliant, and elaborate criminal conspiracies Sherlock Holmes ever faced. Today, on the Storyteller's Ledger, we are not telling a story of murder. We are telling the story of a crime of pure genius, deception, and the strangest motive imaginable. This is the Red-Headed League. Our story does not begin with a crime. It begins with our protagonist, or perhaps our pawn. His name is Jabez Wilson. He is a middle-aged, average, slightly pompous London pawnbroker. He lives a simple, unremarkable life. His only defining feature, a spectacular, fiery mane of bright red hair. The story, as always, begins at 221 B. Baker Street. Jabez Wilson arrives, holding a newspaper, desperate for Sherlock Holmes to solve his absurd problem. He tells Holmes and Watson the story. It all started a few weeks ago, when Wilson hired a new assistant at his pawn shop. The assistant's name was Vincent Spaulding. Spaulding was the perfect employee. He was smart, fast, and most importantly, he agreed to work for half price, half the normal wage. Spaulding had only one oddity. He was obsessed with photography and spent hours at a time in the pawn shop steps, dark, damp cellar, supposedly developing his photos. One day, Spaulding the assistant showed his boss Wilson a strange advertisement in the newspaper. The advertisement announced the creation of the Red-Headed League, founded by a deceased eccentric American millionaire named Ezekiah Hopkins. Hopkins, himself a red-headed man, had left his entire fortune to a trust fund. The fund's only purpose to provide easy, high-paying jobs to any healthy, adult male resident of London who possessed the same fiery red hair. Jabez Wilson thought it was ridiculous, but his assistant, Spaulding, pushed him. He insisted they go. Spaulding physically dragged Wilson to the address listed in the ad. When they arrived, the street was filled with hundreds of men, all possessing every shade of red hair imaginable. It was a sea of orange, rust, and fire. Wilson applied. He was interviewed by the manager of the league, a man named Duncan Ross. Ross was immediately impressed by Wilson's perfect flame-colored hair. He dismissed the hundreds of other applicants and gave the job to Jabez Wilson on the spot. The job was exactly as absurd as the ad promised. Wilson was required to arrive at a small, empty office every morning at 10 a.m. He was not allowed to leave the building for any reason until 2 p.m. His only task, sit at a bare desk and copy the Encyclopedia Britannica, starting with the letter A. Before we continue this unbelievable conspiracy, if you love the most brilliant mysteries of Sherlock Holmes, subscribe right now to the Storyteller's Ledger. For Jabez Wilson, this was a lottery win. Every morning, he left his pawn shop in the capable hands of his assistant, Spaulding, the one working for half price. He went to the empty office, copied nonsense about abbots and archery for 4 hours, collected his massive salary, and went home. This perfect arrangement continued for 8 weeks. Wilson had made a fortune copying the encyclopedia. And then, that morning, he arrived at the office at 10 a.m., ready to work. The door was locked. Nailed to the door was a small, square piece of cardboard. On it, written in crude letters, were only 6 words. The Red-Headed League is dissolved. October 9th, 1890. Wilson was stunned. He ran to the landlord. The landlord had never heard of Duncan Ross, the manager. The man who rented the office was a lawyer who used a fake name, and he was gone. The entire red-headed league had evaporated, vanished. Jabez Wilson was left alone, holding his dictionary, the victim of the most bizarre practical joke in history. He now asks Sherlock Holmes to find out, what was the point of this? Why spend thousands of dollars just to make him copy an encyclopedia? Holmes, upon hearing this story, does not see a joke. He leans back, laughing. He tells Watson, this is a three-pipe problem. This is a case of true genius. Holmes understands the truth immediately. This league, this salary, this absurd job, it was all an incredibly elaborate, expensive ruse, designed only for one purpose: to get the pawnbroker, Jabez Wilson, out of his own shop for exactly 4 hours, every single day, for 8 straight weeks. The real question is why? What was in that pawn shop that was so valuable? And what was the assistant, Vincent Spaulding, the man who worked for half price and found the ad, doing in the cellar all day while the boss was away? This is not a joke. This is the prelude to a massive crime. Holmes leaps into action. This is the 9,000-word investigation. The first thing Holmes does is go to the pawn shop. He needs to see the assistant, Spaulding. He pretends to be a lost customer, asking for directions. Spaulding answers. Holmes looks closely at him, but mostly, Holmes looks down at the knees of Spaulding's trousers. The knees are stained, wrinkled, and covered in fresh dirt and clay. The investigation is almost over. Holmes now knows the motive. Holmes then walks around the corner from the pawn shop. He stops in front of the Coburg branch of the City and Suburban Bank, one of the largest banks in London. He spends 5 minutes just tapping the pavement between the pawn shop and the bank with his walking stick. He returns to Baker Street. He tells Watson, the case is solved. Spaulding, the assistant, is not an assistant. He is, in fact, John Clay, one of the most brilliant, ruthless, and dangerous master criminals in England. A man born into royalty, who chose a life of crime. The Red-Headed League was his invention. Duncan Ross was his partner. The job, copying the encyclopedia, was a fraud, designed to keep the shop owner Wilson away from the shop. John Clay, Spaulding, wasn't developing photographs in the cellar. He was digging. For 8 weeks, Clay had been digging a massive tunnel from the cellar of Jabez Wilson's pawn shop directly into the vault of the bank next door. The criminals are planning to break into the vault this weekend, when the bank is closed and the league has been dissolved, giving them a clear getaway. Holmes now knows the plot. He just has to stop it. This brings us to the climax. The vigil. This is the pure suspense. Holmes gathers Watson, the police inspector Peter Jones, and the bank director Mr. Merriweather. He does not tell them the full plan. He just tells them they must come with him tonight to the bank vault, and they must sit in total darkness. The 9,000-word monologue must capture the agony of this wait. They enter the bank. They walk down into the massive, cold, steel-lined vault. It is filled with crates of gold. The bank director is nervous. Holmes tells him they are waiting for John Clay. The director is terrified. They extinguish the lanterns. They sit in the pitch-black, cold, silent vault, their pistols ready. For hours, the narrator must describe the silence, the feeling of the cold steel, the absolute darkness. Holmes is waiting. He knows the criminals must work tonight, Saturday, to escape before Monday. Suddenly, a sound, a scraping, a glimmer of light, coming from the floor. A hole appears in the stone floor of the vault. A heavy paving stone is pushed aside. A bright light from a lantern shines up from the tunnel below. A hand appears, then a head. John Clay Vincent Spaulding climbs out of the hole into the vault. His partner, Duncan Ross, is right behind him. They are standing in the vault, surrounded by gold. Their 8-week plan has worked. And Sherlock Holmes steps out of the shadows, pistol in hand. He greets John Clay by name. The climax is fast. Clay, realizing the trap, dives back toward the tunnel, firing his weapon. But Holmes strikes his arm with a cane. Watson and the police grab him. The tunnel is blocked. The criminals are caught. The bank is saved. The genius of the Red-Headed League has been defeated. Now the analysis. Back at 221B, Holmes explains the deduction to Watson and to us. How did he know? First, the assistant Spaulding. The fact that he worked for half price was the ultimate red flag. It meant the job. The shop was worth more to him than the salary. He needed the location. Second, the dirty knees. This proved he was spending his time digging, not developing photographs. Third, the tapping of the pavement. Holmes confirmed the cellar was behind the shop, and the bank vault was behind the cellar. Fourth, the absurd Red-Headed League. It was pure criminal genius. It was so bizarre, so ridiculous, that no one would ever suspect it was the cover for a multi-million-pound robbery. The criminals, John Clay, were guilty of the ultimate contempt. They held Jabez Wilson, the pawn, in such low regard. They believed he was just a stupid man with red hair. But it was that very absurdity, the absurdity that made Wilson seek the help of Sherlock Holmes, that led directly to their downfall. This story is a masterpiece of the conspiracy plot. It shows the incredible lengths a criminal mind will go to just to get 4 hours of privacy. It's a perfect case. No violence, no murder, just pure intellectual warfare between the criminal genius, John Clay, and the deductive genius, Sherlock Holmes.